Meet Dr. Rylan Grace, and when he's not performing I'm Just Ken at the Oscars, he's hurtling through space to save humanity from extinction. There's just one problem. Well, make that two.
Never done anything. I've never done a spacewalk. I can't even moonwalk.
He's not an astronaut, and his two crewmates perished while on their journey. So now, the fate of the world is essentially in the hands of one man. This is the story and ending explained for Project Hail Mary, directed by Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, and written by that dude who made Matt Damon eat potatoes on Mars. But what is it that led humanity to the brink of extinction? In short, the sun is dying. Not just our sun, but every star in the galaxy. A small alien microbe known as astrophage, a word that literally means star eater, is slowly eating away at our star's electromagnetic radiation, causing it to dim. It's predicted that in less than 30 years, Earth's temperature will dip 10 to 15 degrees, causing a new ice age, political instability, and a quarter of the world's population to starve to death. So, the stakes couldn't be higher. But there's one star that seems unaffected. Tau Ceti and the most brilliant minds on Earth don't know why it seems to be unaffected. This is where Project Hail Mary comes in, a three-man space mission to discover what's going on. If they can find out why Tau Ceti is unaffected, maybe they can find a way to save our own sun.
The only problem is that this star is 11.9 light years away, essentially making it a one-way trip for the astronauts involved. Humanity also doesn't have a craft capable of achieving such speeds and distances. That is, until scientists discover that the astrophase itself can be used to propel craft at insane speeds. Using a device known as a spin drive, they harness this power so that the crew can reach its destination in 3 years and 9 months. However, due to time dilation and Einstein's theory of relativity, 3 years and 9 months pass for our crew. Back on Earth, 13 years have passed, meaning that even if everything went perfectly and they devised a way for our crew to get back to Earth, 26 Earth years would have passed by the time they got back. It's giving me interstellar vibes.
When we first meet Dr. Grace, he's your average middle school science teacher. But how could a middle school teacher possess the knowledge that could save humanity? This is where Ava Stratt comes in. Former administrator of the European Space Agency, she now leads the international task force in charge of responding to the astrophase crisis. Ava wants a particular kind of scientist on her team, one who thinks outside the box and isn't afraid to challenge our preconceived notions of what is scientific fact. Dr. Grace is that perfect candidate, a man who was essentially laughed out of the scientific community for his paper that challenged the dominant theory that all life must contain water. It's this stubbornness and out-of-the-box thinking that Ava needs if humanity is going to crack the code on how to stop the astrophase. But to stop the astrophase, we must understand what it is. Early on in the film, Dr. Grace, using samples obtained by Ava, discovers that it is a single-celled alien organism, essentially proving life beyond Earth exists.
This astrophase has been feeding on our sun, gathering enough energy so that it can travel to a carbon dioxide-rich planet that it needs to breed. And there just happens to be a planet abundant with this substance in our solar system, Venus. That's why it skipped the planet Mercury, which is actually closer to the sun. This infrared line here is what's known as a Petrova line. Named after its discoverer, Dr. Irina Prova, it shows the path astrophase takes from the sun to its breeding ground on Venus. Dr. Grace was never supposed to be on this flight. The original astronauts were pilot Yag Yi, engineer Alessia Ilukina, and scientist Martin Dubois. However, just days before launch, Dr. Martin and his backup are tragically killed in an explosion, leaving no time to train anyone new. Thus, Dr. Grace, the only one with the knowledge and skills to take on such a task, is asked to take his spot. A spot which is essentially a suicide mission, considering there's no way back.
The story is told non-chronologically, with a series of flashbacks. It's this narrative structure that hides Dr. Grace's greatest character flaw. He's a coward. He doesn't believe in himself. So when Dr. Grace declines to go on the mission, Ava, with little to no recourse, has him apprehended and induced into a coma against his will. He's going to be put on this mission whether he likes it or not. He'll wake up years later with no memory of the events leading up to his capture. It's only after he shows his bravery and courage in the film's final act that this memory comes back, and he realizes he was brave all along. As Yao states, sometimes you just need to find someone to be brave for, which foreshadows Dr. Grace's eventual friendship with this little guy.
But before we get there, it's important to note that Grace has no family or friends. He has no one to be brave for. So when he arrives in the orbit of Tayeti several years later, he's ironically about as alone as he was back on Earth. In the vastness of space, Grace finds an alien spacecraft, and through a series of apprehensive yet comical interactions, makes contact with an alien life form named Rocky.
Aptly named because of his rock-like appearance and Grace's affinity for the Sylvester Stallone movie of the same name, Rocky is an Iridian, an alien species originated from the high-gravity, ammonia-rich planet Irid. They are intelligent, rock-like, five-legged, blind creatures that communicate via musical tones and use sonar. Grace will befriend this creature and create software to translate his tones and vibrations into English words, allowing them to communicate. We'll also see Rocky in this protective quarantine shell, allowing him to venture into Grace's spacecraft, as Rocky cannot survive in human-like conditions. Like humanity, the Iridian's own star is facing the same sun-dimming annihilation. Thus, they sent Rocky and a crew of 22 other Iridians on their own Project Hail Mary of sorts. But the Iridians made a grave error. They didn't take into account radiation exposure. That's because their planet has almost no radiation at all.
Arid's strong magnetic field and thick atmosphere meant that no radiation reached its surface. So the Eridians never had much reason to discover radiation at all. Additionally, the film doesn't mention that Rocky and his crew were described as the first Eridians to truly leave orbit. Space to them is somewhat new. So, when their flight made the long journey to Tayeti, everyone on board died to this radiation except for Rocky. But why? As the ship's engineer, he spent the vast majority of his time near the engine room, which was powered, like the human craft, by astrophase. The massive fuel tanks and astrophase itself acted as the perfect radiation shield, protecting Rocky while the rest of the crew were exposed to lethal cosmic rays. Over the course of the film, Grace and Rocky form an endearing and, dare I say, adorable friendship. Together, they discover the source of the astrophase, a nearby planet they name Adrian, after Rocky's mate and love interest from Stallone's movie.
They deduce that its atmosphere must contain a natural predator, and thus conduct a dangerous mission to collect a sample. If they can collect a sample of this predator, perhaps it can be replicated to stop the astrophase assault on their respective suns. Descending into the volatile atmosphere, they drop a 5-kilometer-long ball and chain to collect this sample to see if their theory is true. This is the most dangerous part of the film, as Grace must venture out of the spacecraft to collect the sample, as the craft itself risks burning on entry as it descends deeper into Adrian's atmosphere. Grace is able to make it back to the craft with the sample, but is knocked unconscious, with the craft on the brink of destruction. This is where we see Rocky's first big sacrifice. He breaks himself out of his quarantine capsule, almost killing himself to save Grace and correct the ship's course. When Grace awakens, he finds Rocky on the brink of death. He doesn't know how to heal this rock-like creature. At the same time, he must also think about the mission.
He tests the sample and finds that there is indeed a predator that eats the astrophase. He aptly names it Tamba, derived from the Tayeti solar system and the word amoeba. Over time, Rocky recovers from his injuries and learns that Grace's mission, unlike his own, was a suicide one. And in another selfless act, Rocky gives up part of his fuel so that Grace can go home. This means it will take Rocky 6 more years to get home than normal, but at least Grace will live to make it back. The two part ways with samples of the Tamba to save their respective planets, and they use these xenonite containers created by Rocky to contain them. But 1 month after their goodbyes, Grace makes a chilling discovery. The Talma have evolved to break out of their xenonite containers. If the Talma escape, they could theoretically eat his fuel source, leaving him stranded. By shutting down life support and temporarily replacing the inside with nitrogen, he's able to kill the escaped Talma and contain the remaining in metal containers so they can't escape.
But what about Rocky? His Telmibo will surely escape, and he has nothing to contain them with, which will leave him stranded and starving in space and his whole planet to die. So Grace has to make a decision. He can stay the course and venture back to Earth, or use his remaining fuel to save his friend. And unlike the selfish decision he made back on Earth, choosing not to go on this mission, this is a complete 180. Grace selflessly chooses to save Rocky, sending probes and instructions containing the Tama back to Earth while he ventures back to his friend. Some years later, back on Earth, we see a cargo ship amongst a frozen expanse. The film never tells us exactly where this is, but since many years have passed with the astrophase dimming our sun, this could be what most oceans look like now.
It's also possible a remote Arctic area is the safest setting for Ava and the project to save humanity, considering the world could plunge into war, if it hasn't already.
We see that the probes have successfully made it to Earth, and along with it, all of Grace's video logs with Ava watching on with glee. Even though she took drastic measures to ensure Grace was on that ship, she never doubted him, even when he doubted himself. Now the real work can begin to reverse the damage the astrophages caused to our sun and Earth. The novel does state that the sun can return to its original luminance. Meanwhile, light years away on the planet Arid, Grace awakens. The Iridians have constructed a biodome, allowing him to live in an Earth-like setting. We'll even see him teaching a class of young Iridians just like he did to human kids back home. He doesn't seem in too much of a rush to head back to Earth. And while he has the scientific knowledge and potentially Iridian resources to attempt to return to Earth, would he want to do so? He has no friends and family. And by the time he did get back home, everyone he ever knew would have died.
In the novel, Grace learned 16 years later from the Iridian astronomy hive that Earth's sun has returned to full luminance, meaning the probes he sent back to Earth must have made it back successfully, and the Talma was able to stop the astrophase from dimming the sun. Other than that, that's all he knows. He does not know how many people died, how badly civilization was damaged, or what Earth looked like during recovery, but it gives him certainty that humanity survived. For a movie that primarily stars one man and an alien, it's kind of ironic how much this film speaks to our own humanity. Not just humanity, but our ability to look within ourselves, be selfless, and be brave. But now I turn it over to you. What did you think of Project Hail Mary? And would you go into space to save humanity? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Until next time, remember, Daddy loves you.